Erno Rubik. Erno Rubik, born July 13th, 1944 in Budapest, Hungary. Inventor of Rubik's Cube, a popular toy of the 1980s. Rubik's Cube consists of 26 small cubes that rotate on a central axis. When the cube is twisted out of its original arrangement, the player must then return it to its original configurement. There are 43 quintillion possible ways of solving it.
There are 43 quintillion possible combinations. Now imagine you have no websites, no books, and no one to show you how to solve it, because you invented it. But you didn't invent the Rubik's Cube. This guy did.
My name is Erno Rubik. I was born here in this beautiful city of Budapest.
It was 1974. 30-year-old Erno Rubik was just beginning his career in academia.
I was lecturing design and architecture, very similar in age with the students. I was very ambitious to find new ways to teach them, especially about space and three dimensions. I made a cube as a teaching game and for myself, learn something from it.
Once the physical cube was put together, Erno began hunting for its secrets.
The question was not that it is possible to solve it, but the question was it is possible to find a method to do that. There is 26 small cubes. It looks the same, but in the structure of the cube, they have different rules.
Erno racked his brain for a strategy, twisting and turning the cube in his hands and his head to unlock his creation.
After I started to understand the nature of the structure of the movement, I found the way for a solution. It's not that straight way.
And after a month, he cracked the code. But the story doesn't end there.
I had the feeling the potential of the object. I find it very simple to manufacture. The result of that, it can be an object that is available for everyone.
In 1980, Erno would finally bring his cube to the world. And from there, it took off, becoming one of the best-selling toys of all time.
Because of the content of the cube, the world discovered it's not a gadget. It's something that is more valuable, more long life.
And after almost 40 years, Rubik's Cube has seen a comeback, with hundreds of competitions every year across the world. For Erno, the cube that bears his name is more than just a toy. It's a reminder to never give up.
There is always a way for a solution. There's always a way to find something else, something new, something different, or find it. If today is not everything is good, it doesn't mean tomorrow cannot be better. It depends on you.
Mae C. Jemison. Mae C. Jemison is the first African-American female astronaut. In 1992, she flew into space aboard the Endeavour, becoming the first African-American woman in space. On September 12, 1992, Jemison flew into space with 6 other astronauts aboard the Endeavour on mission STS-47.
Going into space has to be amazing, and many have done this throughout history. But do you know who the first African-American woman to go into space is? Join me as I share a few fun facts about Dr. Mae C. Jemison, the first African-American woman to enter space. Dr. Mae C. Jemison is an American engineer, physician, and NASA astronaut born October 17, 1956 in Decatur, Alabama. Growing up, Mae was the youngest child of her parents, Charlie and Dorothy Jemison. Her father was a carpenter and her mother was a teacher. In school, Mae was always encouraged by her family, and she did very well, earning a scholarship and attending Stanford University. Mae also enjoyed dance, theater production, and participated in her Black Student Union. Mae would go on to earn her degree in chemical engineering and later would earn her medical degree working as a general practitioner. Another cool thing Mae C. Jemison did was work with the Peace Corps as a medical officer teaching and doing medical research. Wanting to pursue her dreams, Mae would change careers and apply for admission to NASA's astronaut training program. This would be tough with thousands of people trying to get in. Being the first is always a challenge, and one of the first that Mae is known for becoming the first African American woman to be admitted into the astronaut training program on June 4th, 1987. After many years of hard work, Mae C. Jemison would see her dreams of going into space come true on September 12, 1992, when she went into orbit aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour with 6 other astronauts. Mae C. Jemison would go on to teach, establish the Jemison Group, and more. So it just goes to show all things are possible when chasing your dreams. And those are fun facts, a biography on Dr. Mae C. Jemison.
Katherine Johnson. Born in 1918 in West Virginia, Katherine G. Johnson made the most of limited educational opportunities for African Americans. Graduating from college at age 18, she began working in aeronautics as a computer in 1952, and after the formation of NASA, she performed the calculations that sent astronauts into orbit in the early 1960s and to the moon in 1969. Johnson was honored with the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2015 and saw her story brought to light through a book and a feature film the following year.
Meet the Black female NASA genius who helped send the first American into space. Don't know Katherine Johnson? Well, she was the Black mathematician behind the U.S.'s first trips to the moon, and she made her mark as a Black woman despite working in the Jim Crow South during the 1960s. Johnson, who was born in the tiny town of White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia in 1918, was kind of a total whiz kid, and she loved to count. She skipped grades and started high school at the age of 10, which is pretty astounding in its own right. But it's even more amazing considering that schooling for Black students in those days typically ended at the 8th grade. Johnson later went to college to study math before graduating at, get this, 18. She went on to be a teacher and later a stay-at-home mom before landing a position at the newly launched NACA, or as we now know it, NASA, at the Langley Research Center in 1953. She was hired to be a human computer. Women were hired by NASA to count and measure the results of wind tunnel tests. Not only did female computers work separately from their male coworkers, but the female offices were further segregated by color. Black female computers worked in separate rooms from the white female computers, and were even sometimes referred to as colored computers. But Johnson's smarts couldn't be denied. She was transferred to NASA's flight branch after only having worked there for 2 weeks. There, Johnson wound up calculating the trajectory for Alan Shepard's 1961 mission. It was the first time an American had been to space, and Johnson made sure NASA got it right. Johnson also helped guide the Apollo missions to the moon, and was still vital to NASA long after it finally started using quote-unquote real computers. John Glenn, one of NASA's pioneering astronauts, trusted her work so much that he personally requested she recheck calculations from the electronic computers. Though it's pretty clear that Johnson was critical to NASA's first space voyages, Johnson is still only just getting the recognition she rightfully deserved. She's received numerous awards and was even given the Presidential Medal of Freedom from President Barack Obama in 2015. About time.
All right. George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver is perhaps one of the most famous names in African American history. People generally know him as the inventor of peanut butter, but his contributions to science go way beyond that.
Known in history as one of the most well-known African Americans of the 20th century, helping build the farming community. Stay tuned for more as we share our top 10 fun facts about George Washington Carver, celebrating Black History Month. With our first fact, the life of George Washington Carver began circa 1864. The exact date is not known because he was born into slavery in Diamond, Missouri during the Civil War. Next, as a child, George was kidnapped. During this time, slavery raiders would steal other slaves, and George, his sister, and mother were kidnapped from their farm. This next fact is interesting, with Moses Carver, George's owner, letting George stay with him after slavery ended. That is where Moses' wife, Susan, taught George how to read and write because schools would not allow blacks to go there. Looking back in history with the next fact, education wasn't always open to everyone. That is where George was admitted to Highland College in Highland, Kansas, but Carver was denied admittance once the college found out his race. Carver made history in the world of education. That is where he worked with another icon in Black history, Booker T. Washington, managing the agricultural department at Tuskegee Institute. Our next fact is about a nickname given to George Washington Carver. When looking back at his life, because of his love for working with plants, he was given the nickname the Young Plant Doctor. Checking out this next fact, although many people associate George with peanuts, he worked with many plants. That was because after a presentation to Congress about his peanut creations like flour, milk, dyes, and cheese, George became known as the peanut guy, and it just stuck. Moving on to fact number 8, George had some good advice. That is where he helped President Theodore Roosevelt whenever he had questions about agriculture and helping the United States. Moving on to fact number 9, Carver spoke out against racism. For example, from 1923 to 1933, George toured white Southern colleges, stopping by to tell them the importance of people of different colors working together. With our 10th and final fact, George spent a large amount of his life saving money to create a museum. Carver used his savings to create the George Washington Carver Museum, Cultural and Genealogy Center in Austin, Texas. And we have come to the end of our journey sharing our top 10 facts. And if there are fun facts you would like to share about George Washington Carver, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook at Fresburg Cartoon to get notifications and chat with us in the comments.
Ellen Ochoa. Astronaut Ellen Ochoa was born on May 10th, 1958 in Los Angeles, California. Selected by NASA in 1990, Ochoa became the world's first Hispanic female astronaut. In 1991, she graduated from Grossmont High School in La Mesa, California in 1975 and received a Bachelor's of Science degree in physics from San Diego State University in 1980. She then went on to attend Stanford University, where she received a Master of Science degree and doctorate in electrical engineering.
Ellen Ochoa was the world's first Hispanic female astronaut to go into outer space. Ellen was born in 1958 and grew up in Los Angeles, California. She is the granddaughter of Mexican immigrants. She was 11 years old when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, but it wasn't until college that she dreamed of being an astronaut. She became interested in physics and engineering, and she graduated from San Diego State University. Then, later she received her master's degree and doctorate from Stanford University. In 1990, NASA invited her to be a part of their team of scientists. Dr. Ochoa worked on flight software, computer hardware, and robotics. In 1991, her dream of being an astronaut came true. She's flown on 4 space flights and spent more than 950 hours in space. Dr. Ochoa earned many awards for her hard work. Her NASA awards include an Outstanding Leadership Medal and 4 spaceflight medals. She also has 2 schools named in her honor: the Ellen Ochoa Middle School in Pasco, Washington, and the Ellen Ochoa Learning Center in Cudahy, California. She is married and has 2 children. In her free time, she plays the flute, flies airplanes, plays volleyball, and rides her bike.
Lonnie G. Johnson. African-American engineer and inventor Lonnie G. Johnson was born in Alabama in 1949. He earned his master's degree in nuclear engineering from Tuskegee University and went on to work for the U.S. Air Force and the NASA space program. After tinkering with the invention of a high-powered water gun, Johnson's Super Soaker became a top-selling item by the early 1990s. He has since been developing the Johnson Thermoelectric Energy Converter, JTEC, an engine that converts heat directly into electricity. At the age of 13, Johnson attached a lawnmower engine to a go-kart he built from junkyard scraps and raced it along the highway until the police pulled him over.
This is PVC pipe. This is a Coke bottle.
This is a Coke bottle.
Right. Now, once it's pressurized and you pull the trigger, you literally open the valve to let the water come out of the bottle and out through the nozzle.
When inventor Lonnie Johnson was designing this toy,
Okay, wow.
he had no idea what a splash it would make.
Oh,
Since the Super Soaker hit store shelves in the early 1990s, it's racked up more than $1 billion in sales. My turn! When Johnson was growing up in Mobile, Alabama, he played with everything, including fire.
one of my fondest memories actually was when I was mixing rocket fuel in my mother's kitchen. Fire and smoke was spewing out of the pot. My parents realized what had happened. They told me that I would have to mix my rocket fuel outside from now on.
So they just simply admonished you and said, Lonnie, please stop using the stove top. That's a long time.
The fuse was lit, and in 1968, he entered a statewide high school science competition with his very own robot.
It took me over a year to build it, and it was all remote controlled.
He took first place. After earning his master's in nuclear engineering, Johnson landed at NASA's legendary Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
The most powerful water gun ever.
But it was while he was at home in his bathroom, trying to design a new kind of water pump, that he had a happy accident.
Turned the water on, watching what was happening, and just kind of turned and shot the stream of water across the bathroom into the bathtub. And I thought to myself, this would make a really neat water gun.
The Super Soaker was born.
Whoa! I'm having a little trouble seeing, but it doesn't matter because I'm sure the
Johnson then turned his engineering eye on the Nerf gun.
Oh, right in the lip.
The success of Johnson's work with toys has allowed him to pursue more serious projects at his lab in Atlanta.
So conceivably one day this technology could be used as a wearable garment that would charge your cell phone.
This one, called the JTAC, is an ambitious project that Johnson hopes one day allows the conversion of heat into electricity.
That's right.
Lonnie Johnson was inducted into the Alabama Engineering Hall of Fame in 2011.
Was your mother there when you were inducted into that Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Did you ever buy her a new saucepan?
Well, maybe model house.
Carlos Juan Finlay. He lived from 1833 to 1915. Cuban epidemiologist, someone who studies diseases, Carlos Juan Finlay was the first to discover that a mosquito is responsible for transmitting yellow fever from infected humans to healthy humans. Although he published experimental evidence of this discovery in 1886, his ideas were ignored for 20 years.
Farmers Insurance presents Americans in Focus.
Dr. Juan Carlos Finlay became famous for discovering what caused and transmitted yellow fever to hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. Yellow fever was very significant in the United States of America. It killed over 100,000 Americans. And he determined it was a specific type of mosquito that was transmitting the disease. The medical world laughed at Dr. Juan Carlos' theory, but yet they were the ones who were being foolish. In 1871, Dr. Finley addressed a medical conference outlining his theory of the transmission of yellow fever. Dr. Finley was met with silence and ridicule. This made Dr. Finley feel rejected and humiliated by a profession that he had invested so much time in. Unfortunately, during his lifetime, Dr. Finley was never given full recognition for what he had done. It wasn't until 1954, and 39 years after the death of Dr. Finley, that the medical profession recognized what he had truly done. It wasn't until the medical profession took Dr. Finley's theory seriously that they were able to get the mosquito population under control as well as yellow fever. It's extremely important to recognize the contributions that Dr. Finley made, not only because of the countless number of human lives he saved, but so that the world can see the many contributions that Hispanics have made worldwide. For Dr. Juan Carlos Finley, I'm Steve Cisneros for Americans in Focus.
Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur lived from 1822 to 1895. He was a French chemist and microbiologist who discovered antidotes and cures to many dangerous illnesses such as anthrax and rabies. He also successfully invented a way to pasteurize milk and make it safe from tuberculosis. Pasteur also illustrated how germs grew from contamination and disproved the theory of spontaneous contamination.
Louis Pasteur should be remembered for more than just inventing the process that keeps milk from spoiling.
Louis Pasteur is one of the giants of modern science.
It's because of Pasteur that we worry about whether food is pure, that medical instruments are sterilized, and ultimately that antibiotics and vaccines even exist.
He came up with the underpinnings of modern biology and germ theory, and in the process, he saved millions of people's lives.
Born in Dole, France on December 27, 1822, Louis Pasteur attended the École Normale University in Paris before becoming a professor of chemistry at the University of Lille. In 1854, he began studying the problem of spoilage with beer, wine, and milk.
He proved that the reason these beverages were spoiling was because bacteria and other microorganisms were coming in from the outside air. He developed a process called pasteurization, where these liquids were boiled and then cooled, thereby getting rid of the bacteria and microorganisms.
When you say pasteurization, most people are linking it to milk or to food products, but actually it has much more long-lasting consequences. For example, we pasteurize medical instruments, which prevents the spread of disease.
Pasteur realized that if germs were the cause of fermentation, then they could also be the cause of contagious diseases. It is because of his research that we now know to wash our hands to prevent getting sick.
Before the development of germ theory, surgeons and doctors didn't think that something as tiny as a germ could actually hurt something as large as a human being. So they often didn't even wash their hands before cutting into people. And in those days, surgery was often a death sentence.
It's through Pasteur's work that people understood that these infectious diseases were caused by bacteria as well as fungi that were coming in from the environment and invading the body.
Despite skepticism from the medical community, Pasteur continued with his research on germ theory. Eventually, he not only was able to explain the causes of many diseases, but figured out a way to prevent them.
The concept of vaccines wasn't new. Pasteur's unique contribution was to take the actual bacteria responsible for these diseases, weaken it in the lab, and then reintroduce it as a vaccine in susceptible people.
Some of the diseases that Pasteur's vaccinations were able to cure were anthrax, cholera, TB, and smallpox.
The French Academy of Sciences finally accepted the results from Pasteur's germ theory experiments in 1864.
Louis Pasteur gave us an understanding of sterile technique and the importance of antisepsis within medicine.
In 1888, the Pasteur Institute in Paris was created to further Pasteur's research, which continues to this day. Louis Pasteur died on September 28, 1895.
Louis Pasteur's legacy is felt every day in the modern world. And all of us are familiar with his work, whether we know it or not. Pasteurization, the theory of viruses, modern vaccines, hospital cleanliness. Without Pasteur's work, many of us wouldn't even be alive today.
Mario Molina. Physical chemist Mario Molina was born on March 19, 1943 in Mexico City, Mexico. Interested in science at an early age, he created his own chemistry lab in a bathroom at his home. After completing his studies in Mexico and Germany, he moved to the United States in 1968 to obtain an advanced degree in physical chemistry at the University of California, Berkeley. Molina won a Nobel Prize in 1995 for his research on how man-made compounds affect the ozone layer.
Mario J. Molina was born in 1943 in Mexico. He has been interested in science since he was a little boy when he turned his bathroom into a laboratory where he did experiments with his toy chemistry set. After studying in several countries, he came to the United States in 1968 where he earned an advanced degree in physical chemistry. Dr. Molina was very interested in studying the effects of man-made compounds on the Earth's upper atmosphere. In 1974, he and another researcher wrote an article that said certain chemicals called CFCs were damaging the ozone layer in the stratosphere. At that time, CFCs were widely used in things like hairspray cans and refrigerators. Most scientists ignored the article, so the two men held a press conference at a meeting of the American Chemical Society where they asked for a ban on the use of CFCs. They were ignored by both scientists and manufacturers until the National Academy of Sciences reviewed their work 2 years later. After that, more and more scientists believed that Dr. Molina and his partner were right. Today, very few CFCs are manufactured and used. Dr. Molina has spent most of his career doing research and teaching in universities. He has received many awards, including the Nobel Prize for Chemistry in 1995 for his work on CFCs. President Obama awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2013.
Dr. France Cordova. Nobody knew that she'd become a rocket scientist, but France Cordova became that and much more. She was a leader in science and education, a wife, a mother, and a visionary, an optimistic woman with a twinkle in her eye. France Cordova was the first Hispanic woman to lead a University of California campus as chancellor at UC Riverside. She was also the youngest person and first woman to become the chief scientist at NASA. Currently, she is the president of Purdue University, a writer before she was a scientist. The catalyst that set her off on a new career was the same, a desire to understand deeply, solve the mysteries, help humanity.
I went to a parochial school, which was called co-institutional, which was actually very unusual. The girls were on one side of the campus taught by nuns, 5 order of nuns and other teachers, and the boys were on the other side of campus and taught by priests and other teachers. And the science classes, especially the physics classes, it was physics that I was most intrigued by, was considered a class for the boys. And so when several of the girls in my classes, juniors, asked to take the physics class, there was some discussion among the administration, and they decided that 5 of us could take the boys' physics class, and they would have an equal number of boys allowed to take the girls' art class. And so that was unusual for the time. And we weren't particularly encouraged in that physics class.
The teacher thought that we were taking up the space of boys. Boys who were C students got A's. All of us, women, girls who were in the class were A students. And we struggled to get B pluses and A minuses in that class. Those were not given to us lightly. It never occurred to me that it was an injustice. I felt just very lucky to be able to be in the physics class that I wanted to be in. I don't think as a very young person you question your culture and your environment very much because you have no reference frame. My environment was all I knew, and I just wanted to make the most of that environment.
And that is all of our scientists and inventors and engineers that we were learning about for our multicultural science lesson.